got 66 books of the Bible, and they're written over a course of 15 to 1600 years. You have 40 contributing writers. I don't say authors because God's the author. You have 40 writers of these 66 books. Now think about it. They lived in 3 different continents, and they spoke 3 different languages, and they lived over a span of 1600 years. You take all their writings, you put it together, and you get this perfectly congruent book called the Bible. I mean, how ridiculous is that? I mean, okay, go back 1600 years. We go back, we're right around 500 AD. Pick a guy and tell him to write a book, a chapter, right? Then go 100 years and go to a different country, a guy that speaks a different language, tell him to write another chapter. Then go another 100 years, do the same thing, do this for 1600 years, come to 2019, 2020 time period, and tell me you got a book that makes any sense. Okay, but let's sweeten the deal. If you look at the Old Testament was written by several different writers living over the course of 1100 years. So they wrote this Old Testament, which is Genesis through Malachi, was written over 1100 years. We have several writers, correct? Now, these writers made predictions about the coming Messiah, Jesus Christ, okay? Predictions like he'd be born in Bethlehem, he'd be born of a virgin, he'd ride into Jerusalem on a donkey, he'd be betrayed by a friend, he'd be betrayed for 30 pieces of silver. That 30 pieces of silver, it's actually in the Old Testament, would buy a potter's field. I mean, on and on and on. There's 300 of these predictions in this Old Testament, okay? So Jesus comes along, okay? So the last book is written 400 years before Jesus was born. So we got 1100 years. The last book's written 400 years before Jesus, and Jesus comes along and fulfills every single one of the 300 predictions. What are the chances? But there's actually this scientist named Dr. Peter Stoner, and I have his little book. Okay, this book, I went to buy it on Amazon because it's out of print for years, and it was costing $800, but a pastor knew how much I loved this, and he bought it for me as a gift. So here is the book, okay? But this is a scientist who lived in the 20th century, and he said, and his expertise was probability, okay? So what do I mean by probability? Simple probability, if I've got a 5-gallon paint bucket, and I got 9 white tennis balls and 1 yellow tennis ball, and I put them in there and I shake them all up and I blindfold you and I say, okay, pick out 1 ball, Scott. What the chances of you picking out the 1 yellow tennis ball is 1 in 10. Well, this guy's an expert on it, right? So he doesn't do this research alone. He gathers 600 science students from 12 different classes, and they go on this massive project to figure out what are the chances of any human being from the time of Jesus' birth to the end of the 20th century, 2,000 years, any human being on earth could fulfill just 8 of those prophecies. Just 8. Okay? Now, they picked really simple ones. All right? Number 1, Christ to be born in Bethlehem. Micah writes that. Christ to be preceded by a messenger. Isaiah, in a totally different generation, writes that. Christ to enter in Jerusalem on a donkey. Zechariah, in a completely different generation. Christ to be betrayed by a friend. Christ to be sold for 30 pieces of silver. The money is to be thrown into God's house. Christ to be silent before his accusers. Christ to be executed by crucifixion as a thief. That's the 8 prophecies they picked.
And the crucifixion wasn't even a thing yet.
I know, that's what's crazy.
I know, there's some prophecies there that, I mean...
They didn't even invent crucifixion until... So when this was written, it didn't even exist, right? So they go on hours and hours of research, study, doing all that they do, that these scientists do. And their results was actually studied by a third party. And that third party was the American National Scientific Council. And you know what the American National Scientific Council said? What they found was conservative. So what I'm about to share with you is conservative. They said the chances of any human being on earth from the time of Jesus till the end of the 20th century of fulfilling those 8 prophecies is 1 in 10 to the 17th power. Dr. Stoner said, let me make this palatable for the average man and woman. So he said, if you take a silver dollar, which is about that big, and if you have 10 to the 17th silver dollars, you have no place on earth to store them. You have to just spread them out on the ground. And if you have that many silver dollars, you will cover the entire state of Texas, 2 feet deep, with silver dollars.
Wow.
Now, gather all those silver dollars, mark one of them, shuffle them all up, distribute them over the entire state of Texas, blindfold a guy in Oklahoma, put him on a helicopter, start flying over the state of Texas. The state of Texas, it takes 17 hours to drive through. fly over the state of Texas. At any time he says let down, the guy gets out, he's still blindfolded, right? He picks $1 silver. The chances of picking out that $1 silver is the chances that any human being could fulfill these 8 prophecies over 2,000 years. And Jesus didn't fulfill 8, he fulfilled all 300. Yeah.